All right, Alexis, let's take a look at your paper. So we're going to start at the introduction, work our way down. And before I do that, I just want to let you know that we're not doing MLA format just yet because we haven't gone over it. But I did make this double space just so it's easier to go through. So let me start with your hook. Your hook is pretty good. If your closest relative was in pain, suffering, and in your hands you have the plug to end it, would you pull it? That is a good way to get your readers thinking about a topic. And even though this is one of the rare occasions where this is kind of a yes or no answer, but the topic is so severe and controversial that it's okay. The only thing I would say with this one is the wording is a little bit awkward. I would just add a comma here, get rid of this sentence, so that way this becomes one part. And then this part, if you read it out loud, sounds a little bit awkward. If your closest relative was in pain, suffering, and in your hands, you have the plug to end it. Would you pull it? I think what'll work better is if you had the word had here. So then it would be, if your closest relative was in pain, suffering, and in your hands, you had the plug to end it. Would you pull it? I think that just sounds better. It's still in the past tense, and I think that would work here just fine. And then, as we move on, I think you do need a little bit more information to give to the background of mercy killing. In particular here, you start, well, most people think of mercy killing as the involvement of medicine to suppress the suffering of sickness. Ooh, that's really good because you got some good alliteration there. But anyways, this is really good here, but I think you should explain what mercy killing is, because we talk about not having the definitions as a hook, but because you bring this up in the introduction, I would put it in the introduction what it should be. And this, I don't like the rephrasing of the question, but the reason I'm gonna forego that is because should we be allowed to kill off people just because we feel sorry for them? That's a really interesting question to pose. So I'm going to leave this one alone. So overall, no major grammar issues. I would change this one here. And the intro is pretty good so far. Okay, so moving on into this body paragraph. This is pretty good. The overall thing I would say for yours is tie it back to mercy killing being ethical. Because for your... Actually, hold on. Let me double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we'll double check because this is longer than 5 paragraphs, this might be okay. But typically you want to refer back to it being ethical and building off the thesis, especially with an open thesis like this. Mercy killing is ethical in many ways. You have a good example here with the Gilderdale, and then you have the history behind it with the Greeks. So this is all tied in really good, especially here. It has been described as a medical aid for dying for extremely ill here in the United States. I think you mean the word. I think you need to add the word "the" in there. Aid in dying for the extremely ill here in the United States. That would make sense. And then when you go into this example, the one concern I have is how you word this, because I think it's just a misphrasing. A devastating multi-system disease that causes dysfunction of the immune system, endocrine and energy metabolism systems for about 17 years. And it's the 17 years part because, correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn, that's the name, right? So this is for Lynn. So it was Lynn who suffered from the 17 years. But based on how you have the sentence structured, is that people who suffer from ME have this for 17 years. So you need to make clear that this is Lynn who is suffering. So overall, this has some good examples, but it's lacking a little bit of analysis, specifically tying it back into the concept of mercy killing being ethical. Okay? All right, then as we move into this next body paragraph, topic sentence is good. If a patient faces a long, slow, painful death, she relates what's kinder to end their suffering and allow them to end their life comfortably. All this is pretty good. This is a little bit awkward here. I think you need to add or get rid of a word. Pain medications used... Oops, sorry about that. Pain medications used to ease the patient's symptoms and may often have unpleasant side effects. You either need the word are, in which we medications and used, or pain medication, or just get rid of the word and. But also, I might add a sentence or two because you go from it's kinder, well, medications can ease the symptoms, and then you go back into, well, I see it. Just make clear here, it is not as if they're really living to this time. I would just make clear that you are referring to that as if they're suffering, and even if they have pain medications, they're still not living. It's not really easing the pain. I think you just need a little bit further explanation for that here, just to specify that's what you're talking about. But in extension, when you include this example out of mice and men, this works really well. The only thing I would challenge you on, and I'm not going to really ding you on anything, is an act of mercy killing because Lenny was different than most people and deserves to be in peace. I would explain that situation a little bit more, just because, yes, Lenny has a mental disability, but at the end of the day, even though that did factor into it to a certain extent, he did kill Curly's wife. So maybe explain just a tad bit more, either explicitly say his actions, people didn't understand his actions or whatever, or just specify that people were going to go after him. But overall, this is a really good body paragraph, so that is fantastic. And then with your next body paragraph, because you go beyond the 5-paragraph format and that structure, this works pretty good right here. So you do talk about the legal concept of suicide and how people can do that, but then when there's that extra level of having a doctor or someone else decide that for them, we look at it a little bit differently, right? And those are two completely different narratives. So this works especially in the structure because it gets your reader thinking. And I will let you know that a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, some people are struggling with doing these hypotheticals. The reason this works better for you is because you are implementing your own kind of writing, following 2 paragraphs with evidence and analysis. So this is pretty good. And you have a little bit of legality here. So the only thing I would say is if you want the paper to be top-notch, throw in a quote or 2, or throw in just a little bit of evidence to go in here. But for your writing, for the sake of what it is right now, it is fine. Just because you're beyond the 5-paragraph structure, so that gives you more room to kind of implement these hypotheticals because you've used good analysis in kind of the 2-paragraph minimum of the evidence and analysis. So that is good so far. Okay, so like I said with your previous body paragraph, because you're specifically bringing up the opposition, you will still want a specific example to support what you are saying. So the statistic is good. You're talking about people who are not supporting it. Right here, I might put the word, however, the patient may have fears of the possible future pain, because that will show the transition. You need a transition word here because you're going from the opposition into your component that you say it's ethical. So put some kind of transition word there. And what I'm surprised about, and this isn't a bad thing, you do have the one anecdotal thing with Lynn earlier, but I think this would be I think what you could do to make this better is a good place from the Time article or the Kevorkian article to talk about the suffering that some of those patients had and put it in here as an example of an evidence, and it won't make your paper even better. Because right here I wouldn't call this hypothetical, it's kind of a wrap up, but I would say use a specific piece of evidence there that supports your claim and you will be good. Okay, so typically in the conclusion, you want to start with a thesis and work your way backwards with the introduction. However, because you're still wrapping this up in an insightful way, it's not as big of a deal, because it doesn't have to be that way for everything. It's just that it typically works a little bit stronger. The only thing I would say is get rid of this, because like we talked about with introductions before, this has been going on for so long and since the beginning of time, whatever it is, you still want to avoid that in the conclusion because it's just not hypotheticals, but just vague statements that you don't want to use. But overall, this is really good. And again, ending it with, would you pull the plug, is a good way to end it, considering that you had that with your introduction. So overall, you have pretty good evidence with analysis. There's a few moments where you need to add a little bit more, especially with your opposition paragraph. But that's pretty good. It's really just the opposition. Grammar-wise, you have some awkward word choices, and I think that's just uh, you need to add a word or get rid of one. And then this is good, except you do have a contraction here. This is life is, and you should just spell out life is instead of life's, but that's the only contraction that I saw. If there's more, yep, there's another one there. So watch out for those contractions. So you have the word choices, some comma things. You want to put a comma before the word but, and some transition words to work on. But overall, this is a pretty good paper. I think you are good to go. Just look at that analysis component, and I think your next paper will definitely be even better than how good this one is right now.